I am Abel Miller from Wisconsin, and I'm assistant professor at University of Wisconsin-Whitewater and an artist, and I curated the Plain Text Pavilion. The Plain Text Pavilion is kind of, from my end, was more of like an extension of a paper that I wrote like a year maybe before they went online. The paper was about ASCII art, and I wrote it with Go280. One of the things that we were talking about in our paper was like a little bit of history of ASCII art, but then trying to connect it to some of the things that we thought were interesting that are happening right now. And so for the wrong, then I sort of used some of those ideas that maybe I guess sometimes get missed because they're sort of not as like fancy or flashy. So the way that I thought about putting together the pavilion for the wrong was, in my head, it was a lot like doing a speed show. But I think some of the conversation we were all having over email towards the day that everything went live was really, like the craziness of organizing and setting up the show when everybody's distributed and everybody's very busy. But that's kind of like part of the way how we browse. So I guess if we use a model of like a Biennale or something like that, I would assume that it's kind of a similar sort of experience where there's so many shows and so many artists showing work that you can't see everything, and we can't see everything every day anyway. So in a way, it sort of forces you to like pick and choose something to focus on, and when I was teaching that semester, I usually offer like time wasters in class. So we watch a video or something that doesn't have really anything to do with class or whatever we're doing, but just like a fun way to share projects or things that I think are interesting. And so that couple of months, I pretty much just like picked a pavilion, and then shared it with my students, and that for me was part of a way to like make myself sit down with more of the work or more of the pavilions and like focus on the individual works, what the curator was maybe trying to do or how I interpret that, and then talk to my students about some of the stuff. The group Normals, they're from Paris. And I met them a couple of years ago while I was there for a conference, and they're like, I was interested in their work because it was not really like a lot of the other things that I'm like aesthetically normally drawn to, but they would consider themselves like, I guess, speculative designers. So they kind of write comics and design things, and they're kind of like science fiction. But anyway, so I met up with them, and after the conference, we were talking, and they were talking about the things that they're writing, and I thought that that would be maybe an interesting sort of like different thing to bring in to the show. And what they made for the wrong for the plain text pavilion was kind of like they made up an imaginary programming language, only use like four letters for, and it makes all these sort of statements, and then they use that stuff, or some of those graphics to generate a bunch of videos. I also really liked Jeremiah's Library of Babel page, which kind of, I think, modeled after the Jorge Luis Borges story, The Tower of Babel, where the Library of Babel, sorry, where the every book or every combination of every character in every language is contained within this library, and it kind of is an endless thing, but like somewhere inside of that library everybody's life is contained, because there's all this like infinite number of possibilities. And so the site that he generated around that idea is more or less a page that just keeps randomly generating text characters into things that look like language or sentences, or they could be, even though they maybe necessarily aren't, and it keeps kind of running for forever. So it's kind of like a web-based version. I mean, there's other really great work in the pavilion, and I was like, I mean, those are just a couple of them, I guess, but also, I guess, last one real quick, Stilio made a sort of, what do you call it? glitch text generator. So it uses like combining diacritical marks and things like that. But you can just type in a message and then like choose which kind of things you want to add to it, and it will basically like turn it into something that like Glitcher would make, which is really interesting to me for the pavilion, because Glitcher was also in our pavilion. So we had someone who was making a sort of web-based tool for other people to generate these sort of graphics or you know, like sort of crazy text, and then also a collection of like screenshots from Glitcher doing this in social networks over the last kind of several years. So I guess what ended up happening for me then, you know, and this happens a lot when I organize a show, because I hesitate to like consider myself a curator. I guess I don't know what necessarily what a curator's like role or job is. What does a curator really like do that, you know what I mean? Like, is there, I don't know. But as an artist, right, you always are like looking at what other people are doing, and you know, you find things that are interesting, and sometimes that works into some of your own ideas, or you learn from what they're doing. You know, you look at their source code or whatever. But but I think like that to me is like part of this idea of organizing a show, right? So like the ones that I'm looking at or that I'm interested in or that I'm learning from are like the things that I, you know, want to share with other people or that I want to talk about. So like to do something like this plain text pavilion is kind of like an excuse to like get people to share really awesome things with me, and then to share those things with everybody else, or the rest of the world, or whoever wants to look at it.